okay, again, if you start learning about your child, you learn how they're learning, and you do find out there's a working memory issue, okay? And it's very difficult for your child to learn multi-step directions, okay? So you know what happens is you say to your child, hey, I need you to go upstairs, you've got to brush your teeth, get your book bag, put your shoes on, come back downstairs. And so they go upstairs, and then they come back down. And you say, did you brush your teeth? No. Did you get your shoes on? No. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, this seems so relevant to me and my kids. How do you improve working memory or whatever
It's
that
called
is?
short-term memory loss or short-term memory deficit. Or
yeah. They do that to me all the time. I'm like, did you do it?
They're like, well, honestly, a lot of it is figuring out where it's coming from. Because, is that because they're different things in different areas, because there is this wonderful thing called executive functioning that we're learning, a ton about now. And so it could
so
be
they're doing it at school, but they're not doing it at home.
It could be a true executive functioning issue, which is that's where children have a lot of trouble with organizing themselves and even understanding like a semblance of order. And I would definitely recommend for a parent education program to get somebody in to talk about executive functioning and what that is, because it basically is the functioning areas of your brain that allow you to be an organized, efficient, kind of well-running person. And of course, obviously, there are a lot of children that don't do this, and those children are the ones that put their homework in the book bag and somehow it never gets home. And then you have them finish up their homework, put it in the book bag, but somehow it doesn't get back to school, or it never gets turned in at school. These are also kids that have terrible time with time concept, and so you can say we only have 10 minutes to do this. It means nothing to them. 10 minutes, that could be an hour. They don't get that. They are also kids. They just have all kinds of spatial issues too. Sometimes.
Is that linked to like ADHD or sensory processing per se, or it can be across the board?
It's truly what they're finding now is that it's truly a definite certain function of the brain.
Okay.
But a lot of times these different issues are what we call comorbid.
Okay.
You have some executive dysfunction issues. You may have some attention issues. And again, it's all these firing of the neurons going on. And some children don't have any issue with that. They're super organized, but they still might have a lot of impulsivity issues. Mm-hmm. So it's very different. And actually, to be honest with you, one of the things we started noticing at Skunk is that we would have this child completely disorganized. They'd come in the room, they're just a mess, they're disheveled. They've dropped the book bag on the floor, they're going, oh, here's my good friend, whatever. Hey, have you unpacked your homework? Oh, what? Oh, okay. This kind of thing. Never go home with the homework, and they can't organize their homework, all those kinds of things. And then they had a lot of trouble maybe attending and focusing in class. Well, for a true kind of what we think of as attention deficit, some of those children would begin taking like stimulant medication to address the focusing and attention piece of it. And that would improve tremendously. They were with it, they were focusing, their learning was better because of that. They weren't as impulsive. But they still were amazingly disorganized. They couldn't pull that piece up together. And that's when this, people even started learning more about this term executive dysfunction. Anyway, and so that's a lot of that. So a lot of it is figuring that out.
And just training them? Or
well, there's a lot of different things you can do depending. But a lot of it, yeah.
Fish oil.
A lot of it, yeah. Well, actually,
I've tried that.
Tons of good research on
it takes time.
On fish oil and stuff like that. But a lot of it truly is figuring out, and that's why I was saying, pick your demon and figure out. But for instance, it could be that your child is completely disorganized and just cannot, again, for some of the people with executive dysfunction, honestly, you could say to them, how long did you work on that project? Did you work on that project for 5 minutes or 30 minutes? And they truly could not tell you. So therefore, if they have to sit down and do a science project, if you're not there saying, okay, move to the next step, okay, keep going, they could be hours working on the science project.
So with children like this, to some whatever degree,
Right.
My daughter has one of these, but not the other. being involved, making I do checklists or,
Yeah.
I do a sticky note kind of thing because she can't remember the three
Yes,
things. But
right.
she's very organized. It would never turn anything on late. But she could remember the three things to do.
Yeah.
So you do advocate, staying involved, making checklists, finding out the one area that might not work and just honing in on that and working with them every day.
And that's the best thing, and then figuring it out, because all of a sudden, instead of telling your child and getting so aggravated that you tell them those three things, then yeah, you have the little sticky note and you just bullet point, tennis shoes, book bag, toothbrush, whatever, and then you just stick it on. And then they go upstairs, and you know what? They come back down and they do it. And I'll just tell you one other quick thing. I have a friend who actually, her child is older. He was in high school, and she was like, before, and plus, when they're in high school, you're dying, because she was like, it doesn't look like you even shaved today. Do you have on deodorant? I mean, some of this kind of stuff. So, like, what she did was she said, I need you to do these 5 things. Before you go to school, I need you to brush your teeth, shave, whatever. So she put these items in a basket. And so every day, he would go into the bathroom, he would dump out the basket. And then he would shave, throw it in the basket. Use deodorant, throw it in the basket. Brush his teeth, throw it in the basket. And when he was done, he'd done the 5 things, and they were back in the basket for the next day. So, it is unfortunately just learning these strategies, coming up with things like that. But unfortunately, what happens is if you don't realize that your child cannot memorize that information auditorily, or you don't realize that that's an issue, you're going to be so aggravated, and you're going to be yelling at them for it. Why don't you listen to me? You never listen, blah, 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 this, or whatever. So I think, figuring out what it is that's going on and then being able to come up with appropriate response is exactly what you need to do.
Well, what I was Mary Elaine looked at me and turned and she says, but is it fixable? Like,
Do they grow out of it?
And I think that it's really important, some of the things that she just mentioned in terms of figuring out what works for your child. And also, as a middle school educator, I have to chime in there that you have to understand that when your kids hit middle school, it's all out the window anyway, because the brain does change function. So you might have a kid who in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they're kind of with it, they're all together. And let's say it's a boy, for example, and they hit 6th grade and they're still reasonably okay, and then 2nd semester, 6th grade hits and they're complete lunatics and can't keep up with anything. It'll come around. As a parent of 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl, my son has I always like to say, he has a touch of Asperger's syndrome. He's on the autistic spectrum. And it's finding, when they figure out those pieces of what works. So like for my son, we tried desperately to get him to use his agenda. Use your agenda. We were working with his teachers in elementary school, had his IEP, had to use his agenda. Well, he hit middle school, and of course he became a raving lunatic, as many middle schoolers do. And all of a sudden, he comes home and he has handwriting on his hands. And, don't say a word. She's laughing because this is what I do. When there's something really important, I write it on my hand. Well, now he's in 11th grade. He's number 20 in his class of 500 kids or whatever. And literally, he will come home from school and his whole arm is covered with his assignments. At first, my husband and I were like, what are you doing? Why are you writing all over yourself? But it worked for him. And that, we just had to kind of put it to the side and say, this is how we're going to make it work. So my suggestion is, first of all, just be calm. It's all going to change. It's all okay. But try to find what works for each individual child. No 2 children are ever the same. This is what we have to do as educators. This is what we have to do as parents. So just take your time.
And I think if you've had some dialogue with your child about this, and they realize that you're on their side and that they're then they know you're going to help them come up with the strategies that work. And it's just hard. It's just, and I remember Robert left Skank, went to Sarah Smith, and he just totally bombed this test. And so it was real interesting. And so he came home and I said, wow. He said, oh, you have to sign this test. So, and it was all new to me too. And I was like, why do I have to sign it? Well, because I failed it. And I said, oh, okay. So I'm signing the test. And I said, well, it's interesting. I didn't realize you had this test. Could we have been studying at home for this, and helping you study at home? And he said, well, yeah. And then I said, well, it wasn't on your agenda. Well, I didn't write it down. Why didn't you write it down? Well, I couldn't study for it. Really? Why? Well, I lost my study guide. Oh, okay. And I said, well, did you do any studying for this in school? Yeah, we did a little bit. I said, well, did you have your study guide in school? No, I had lost it before then. And I said, well, what did you do when the other kids were studying? Oh, I read a book. And I said, you didn't tell your teacher that you'd lost your study guide? And this was like third, fourth week in school. He's brand new at the school, the whole thing. He said, no, I was about to tell her I'd lost my study guide. And I said, well, how'd that work out for you? And I said, because, Mom and Dad, do you think we're okay with this failing grade? No. Are you okay with this failing grade? No. I know, because I know you could have done better if you'd studied, whatever. And I said, so you're right, this isn't acceptable. So what can you do next time? Kind of thing. And it was just this whole working through process. But what I really wanted to do was go, inside and just say, oh my gosh, how did you fail this test? And, whatever. But anyway, so I do think if you have that kind of dialogue, because I will say Robert kind of pulled it together and he had a fabulous 4th and 5th grade. And then we went to Sutton, and it has been crazy with that whole agenda thing, and he's the type, I don't know if y'all have heard about Miss Lee over at Sutton. I love her. She's the most organized person. She sends her PowerPoint presentations to you and does all this kind of stuff. But she's a science teacher. But anyway, he was horrified. And he said, you want to know what she said to me? She said, I didn't write my homework down in my agenda. And she embarrassed me in front of the whole class. And she said, this is going to be a problem for you, isn't it? And then she came over there. And I'm sure he's exaggerating because he's real dramatic. I don't know where he gets it. But anyway, she came over there and she made me write it down in my agenda. And I said, you know what? That doesn't sound like a mean teacher to me. That sounds like an incredible teacher that cares enough about you that she wants you to get your homework assignment in there. And maybe that was when he said, and she said, this is going to be a problem for you, isn't it? And I said, that's kind of a problem for you. And he said, yeah, it kind of is. And I said, yeah, and for me too. So let's be thankful for Miss Lee, that we've got Miss Lee making it, So anyway, but a lot of that is that, and giving that teacher the benefit of the doubt and things like that. So anyway, okay, let me just keep running real quick. But, so this good teaching, because many teachers instinctively respond to the notion that students learn and excel, and they believe that they and I have to say, I have to be honest with you, I am amazed at what public school teachers do. I'm amazed. And so if you haven't done something nice for your child's teacher, do something nice for your child's teacher. I cannot believe that they have 26, 27, whatever kids. Miss Jones that we had in 4th grade, Miss Parker that we had in 5th grade. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe they even had time to answer my emails, and they did. But I could see that different learning, and I see it in these teachers at Sarah Smith. Doing different learning things. Changing it up, doing one project this way or another thing this way. It's really amazing. But I think looking for those learning opportunities. And I love this quote, but it's just interesting because of Piaget, of course, doing this a long time ago. But look, the principal goal of education is to create men who are capable of doing new things, not simply of repeating what other generations have done. Men who are creative, inventive, and discoverers. And I think that's fascinating, especially in light of this new brain research. I mean, same thing. So are our schools modeling that? And I just think we have to be careful. And another quote that I just really love was Martin Luther King, intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. I really like that quote. But I just think that that's huge. So what are these classrooms? Well, a relaxed, focused atmosphere. And we just talked about that. You want your child to feel safe. Other things, multisensory learning. You guys can kind of go over this and keep learning. But one that focuses on the 3 C's, this cooperative learning. And I'm seeing a lot of that. I love this cartoon. I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. And I'm not going to lie to you. Teachers are control freaks. I mean, the people who go into teaching are often control freaks. I mean, they are. I'm one of them. And so you go in and you're like, this is how my classroom is going to run, and this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to do this. And I can absolutely make 25 4th graders do exactly like I can't do anything else in the world, but I'm going to make those 25 do exactly like I tell them to do. And I mean, it is really true. We have that personality. They're organized and efficient and that kind of thing. So it really is sometimes is something you have to encourage those teachers to do. And I think most of them, luckily, are in the profession because they really do want kids to learn and they really do love kids. It's not the money. And so they're doing that kind of thing. And luckily, like I said, at a good public school like Sarah Smith, those are the kind of teachers that you have. They want that. They will work with your child. So, and they do these things. This is horrible, but what I wanted to tell you about this is that I thought it was really good because on the left-hand side it says some of the recent brain research suggests, and then teaching suggestions for that on the right-hand side. And if you turn your page one more time, I ran it off large. Yeah, that didn't make So here I am in my 40s, so I ran it off large for you so you could see it. But I think that's really good, and I do hope you'll share that with even the teachers here.
Yes.
So, and just real quickly, the other thing I wanted to tell you is that Sarah Rawson Smith, I just think they do a very good job with children who learn differently. They're public school. They can't do everything. But I do think of all public schools, Sarah Smith does a fabulous job with this. And here's some of the things. The types of learning environment, their teachers are well trained. They probably could do this presentation for you. Excellent teachers, excellent leadership. The smart phonics that they're using, I will say that I know you guys know my background is in dyslexia, which basically is reading difficulties. And there's been a ton of research on it. They know what works to teach children how to read. And one of them being a systematic phonetic-based approach to phonics and smart phonics is that. So I love the fact that all the lower school teachers have been trained in that, and they're continuing to use some Orton Gillingham strategies for the children who are struggling in reading. That's huge. Because, we get calls all the time from different elementary schools, and they'll say, my child is a struggling reader, and I'm getting nothing. They're doing nothing to help me. And it's because the teachers aren't trained. Nobody knows what to do. And luckily, with good leadership here in this school system, people are like, no, we do know what to do. And we know what to do with these struggling readers, and they're doing a good bit of it here. So that's awesome. Everyday Math, of course, is a great math series for children who learn differently. When I was trained in Everyday Math, I wanted to go back so badly and teach math again to so many students because, we have this way of teaching math, especially with what I call a vanilla math series. Like, you just fill out this, okay, this week it's geometry, and this week it's this, and this week it's this. And if a child, and you've probably seen this, your child may have come up with the answer, and you say, okay, but how did you come up with the answer? Well, I just did it differently. But I came up with the answer. And they can sometimes even tell you how they came up with the answer. But if it's not the exact way that the teacher shows you, then it's wrong. So the nicest thing about Everyday Math is that they teach the children the different algorithms and say, well, if you want to come up with it this way, you can. But if you want to come up with it using this algorithm, you can't. And the children are able to kind of figure that out and say, no, I'm using this one. This is how I came up with the answer. And so that's so cool. And then also Everyday Math, is a spiraling technique so that they touch on some things, but then they go back and then they touch on it again at a little bit of a higher level. And for different learners, that's also really nice. Great books. The Great Books program that they have here with all that rich literature is so good. And of course the fact that it's an international baccalaureate school because along with the 3 C's, a lot of what's being taught is looking at our world globally because we are going to become a global world. It's no longer what's going on in America and what's going on in China. It is, we are working, doing businesses all over the world with everybody, and I think having that global perspective is huge, and our kids are getting that with the IB program. And such a nice, keen awareness of diversity and other things that are going on in the world, so that's huge. This is just my stuff. That's where I got a lot of information, and that's basically it. Now,
Is that last slide on here, those websites? I see the books.
Yes, that is on there. It is. Now, okay, I'm willing to do some questions and answers. I don't know how long y'all are here if you want to stay, but I will say one thing. I did a few more slides. Let me just, where are we at this point? I wanted you to know that
Early clues on dyslexia.
let me tell you, I'm going to hold up her thing real quickly. I felt like it was important to kind of show you one of the things, obviously, that I'm passionate about are these children that are struggling in reading, who are different learners when it comes to learning how to read. Very typically in America, we use a certain set reading series and we say, start reading, and about 20% sometimes don't do very well with it. And so, again, Sarah Smith is doing some great things to help those poor readers, but for those of us who are in the field of dyslexia, we do not believe it is a developmental issue. It is not. And there are certain things that a child should be doing. So we have this here. So if you know of a friend or somebody who is, I just thought you might like to have our little sheet on dyslexia. In other words, like, okay, what should they be doing at preschool, that kind of thing. And then also what I included were some early clues, other clues. So in other words, I'm kind of veering off to what I know best. But one of the things that I do want you to know is this. So I won't even go through this, but it's in your slide. Some early clues for that. But one of the things I wanted you to know was this. I just threw in some slides, but okay, hold on. I do want you to see this. Do you know how many children in a classroom struggle? Like, let's say there were 20 kids in a classroom. How many of you think, how many children out of those 20 will have difficulties learning to read out of the 20? 1 in 20?
5, 6.
5, 6, it's 4. 4 in 20. So basically 1 in 5 are going to have difficulty learning to read in a traditional kind of way of teaching, and even with some good support. So of course, that's pretty huge for us. But this is the thing I wanted you to see, I will just throw this in there. One of the coolest things that's being done right now is all of the research on the brain, research on dyslexia, and what does happen when a good reader reads, and what is actually happening in the brain of the dyslexic. And it is fascinating. But, one of the things, if you are a struggling reader, you don't read as much, and then you don't get that rich vocabulary, and everything, it's like a spiraling downward or whatever. Look at the slide, because the time spent reading each day, look at that. If you spend 1 minute a day reading, then it's about 8,000 words. Bump it up to 20 minutes a day, just 19 more minutes of reading a day, and look at that. 1.8 million words per year.
I'm showing that to my son.
Look at that.
Wow.
Yeah. So encouraging your child to read is just so important. But anyway, that's pretty huge. Okay, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was this, because we were talking a little bit about we were talking about your child and the issues that they're dealing with and the learning styles, things like this. You're going to have an OT come in March. Come to that, because that's fascinating. And you think, well, my child doesn't have any sensory integration issues, or my child doesn't have that. The thing is, what they're finding out about all this great brain research, like I was saying, is that, and I use that awful word comorbid, but what's happening is, as they're doing the brain research, they're realizing a lot of these things are on a continuum, kind of A to Z, where your child might be not having, that doesn't come out right, but like LMNOP, you might not be there, but you might be at J and not even realize that, because it's not really interfering with their learning. And I always say that to parents. I think one of the best things you can do is figure out everything that's going on with your child's learning, and also what's interfering with their learning. But the second 2 questions are, well, how much is it interfering, and do I even need to do anything about it? Okay? But I think the more you know, the better. And so if you can just really help and figure out, what's interfering, and the more knowledgeable you can become on that, the better. Because, like, again, here comes this person, she's going to be talking about sensory integration, and what might happen is you realize, that's not my kid's thing. But at the same time, you might be like, oh my gosh, my child does do that. I didn't realize that. So I want to talk a little bit about these different areas that can also be going on, so that you know. And in case, I do have to tell you, one of the things is that once you start becoming aware of this, you do need to be careful. Because if you're like me and you're invited to birthday parties, you start watching the children, and you start going, oh my God.
Diagnosing them.
That.
Yeah.
That child cannot skip.
Yeah.
There's no way she can
Yeah.
sequence in the class.
Over-diagnosing, yeah.
And you're like, oh, hey, have you ever thought about getting an OT because your child's handwriting is horrific? Anyway, whatever it is. So but let me just quickly tell you a So there's something called a learning disability, and that truly is when the child is not able to learn in a traditional method, or something different is going on in their brain, like dyslexia. You obviously have different learning issues. Some children don't have trouble with dyslexia, but man, they have trouble with reading comprehension. Some children don't have dyslexia, but they have dyscalculia. There's all kinds of things, learning disabilities, and they're finding out more and more about what's going on in the brain. Okay, and then that there's a piece often, attention difficulties and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And, do I think it's misdiagnosed? Yes, I do. Do I think that there's a lot of children on medication that shouldn't be? Yes, I do. But do I believe that there's a neurological disorder that is causing children not to be able to focus and be attentive? Yes, I do. And I've seen it enough to where I think it is worth looking into that if you're hearing that. But I think it can be a lot of other things, too. Because obviously if the child is anxious in the classroom, guess what? They don't focus well, they're nervous, they're impulsive, so you really have to watch that and figure out what it is that's going on with your child in regards to that. But then there's this other piece I was telling you about, this executive functioning piece that they're learning more and more about. And one of the things I did want to tell y'all that's coming out from executive functioning is that, and I know y'all will know where I'm coming from, one of the things that they're finding out with this executive dysfunction is, you have to come up with a strategy so that you can function in the day. Can you get done everything that you need to get done? And y'all know as well as I do, as adults, a lot of times we figured it out. So I know that if I'm going to go to the dry cleaning, putting it in the seat doesn't even help me. I mean, it's right there, but I get in my driveway and I'm like, can't believe I didn't take the dry cleaning. Okay, but what does work for me is a sticky note on my dashboard. Dry cleaning. For some reason, that works for me. I drop the dry cleaning off.
Because you're visual.
I'm good.
Because you're visual. You need the visual.
Exactly.
Is executive dysfunction I don't know if you call it a disorder, but is it something that stands alone, separate from all other? Because you said it can be comorbid, but it can be just its own.
Most people consider it
struggle.
That it is a true brain piece that's not working as well. And again, that time concept is involved in that. Again, it's children, who don't understand time, so you're losing your mind because they can't do a project because they don't realize I only need to spend 5 minutes on this and I only need to spend 5 minutes on this. They are also the children that, if you say, well, we'll do that in 3 days, it means nothing to them. What was yesterday? Tuesday? Wednesday? Friday.
At what age is it, like ADD and all this stuff? I mean, because at a certain point, like you're talking about a kindergarten, I've got a first grade boy who is highly distracted, highly active. He's, he needs to be doing jumping jacks in the classroom, and he can't, obviously. At what point, or as a teacher and a parent, do you become concerned about attention? If they're doing fine in school, is it once they're not doing fine in school, then something?
That's a really good question. Again, go back to what I was saying. Is it interfering with their learning? And then if it is, how much is it interfering, and do you need to do anything about it? And I think, but unfortunately, I think with attention pieces, you do just have to watch it very closely. Because if you can implement strategies, if the teacher does allow him to get in the back and jump, or I'm going to give you three. One of Robert's teachers here gave him 3 chips. And she just said, here are your 3 chips, and whenever you need to, you just put a chip on my desk, and you go down the hall to the water fountain. She did that without me even asking. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, So, and that's just what he needed. He just needed to get up and move. So, and the water fountain was way down the end of the hall. It gave him an out. He didn't have to interrupt. The classroom was fast. So, if you can do strategies, and that's helpful and working, great. And then the only other thing I would say is just, again, what are they missing out on the learning? And then the other thing I have to say for attention is that one of the things I always worry about with kids is how hard are they having to work? I think that's huge. Because if they come home and they're melting down at the end of the day because they're actually just spent, they have worked so hard, then you may want to look into doing something, that would help them. And of course, obviously, stimulant medication is one route to go, where you can see if that would help them focus so that they're not having to work so hard. And that is a terrible decision for parents. Nobody wants to put their children on stimulant medication. Nobody. I don't know if a parent has ever said, that's a great idea, I want to do that. But they'll do it because they can see how helpful it is. But again, so I think it's just watching that, looking at that balance. and then, coming up with strategies, that kind of thing, and just kind of figuring it out. And maybe a different environment is better, a smaller environment, just seeing what works for you and your family and that kind of thing. But I think that's helpful. And again, working with the teacher to say, he really needs to get up and get out. Could we do this? What could we do? Brainstorming.
Because I think the kinesthetic is so important, but I think, unfortunately, that's the element of education that is addressed the least. And I think boys, I mean, not that every girl is a typical girl, but I think boys,
oh yeah, they need
the achievement gap.
Yeah, no, I agree. They need to be moving, and they need to move. And of course, what happens a lot of times is in schools, the PE gets taken, or if they didn't turn in the homework, they get,
no recess.
No recess. That just can't happen. Yeah, I really feel strongly about that. They've got to get out and move. One really good book to read about that, and I'm pretty sure that I know the PE teacher here has even read it. It's on our list.
Get your phone and Google it.
This is a great book. It's by John Rady and Spark. It's called Spark. And they did a ton of research on the connection between physical activity and the brain and learning. Yeah. And it wasn't even just physical activity. It was the actual, kind of what they're getting, the physiology of, how fast your heart rate is going. Because, this one PE teacher in the book, he talks about this. He had this girl in the class. She was this skinny, scrawny little girl. And she would, shuffle around the room. And it looked like she was being so apathetic. She would get up, and everybody else was doing their laps. And she's, barely running. When he measured her heart rate, he found out she was working 10 times harder than anybody in the class. So he was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how hard you were working. And it just turned this whole child into a different child because when you realized what she was really doing. Anyway, and it was fascinating. So that's a great book, and every PE teacher should have it. And, to talk about that important piece. And doing some of that kind of stuff in the morning. All right. Okay. So, but anyway, that executive functioning piece is great, very interesting. There's some great speakers in town who can give you even more strategies for that piece. But one of the things, so here's what my point was. So one of the things we started doing as teachers to help children with organizational issues, right? And that executive functioning is, okay, I'm going to implement a great system for you. And as a mom, okay, I bought all these great baskets, and I ran off little cards that had pictures because they couldn't read yet. And so here was Batman, and here was Lego, and here was whatever, right? And so you just expect them when they finish playing with Batman, it goes back in the Batman basket, and the Lego goes back in the Lego basket, and then, and of course some of that is just kids, and right? But one of the things we're finding is if you try to take an organizational system that works for you and implement that into your child's life, a lot of times that will not work. It won't work. So what you've got to do is you've got to sit down with your child and say, this is our issue. And the best book for this is called Smart But Scattered, for executive dysfunction. Smart But Scattered. It's on our list. The other book that I just bought that I also like is called That Crumpled Paper Was Due Last Week.
That's good.
And Welcome to My Life, that's it. And that is also a very good book. And they have some really good strategies. Some of these things I was talking about, they have some really good strategies as to how to help your child get organized. But one of the things that they say is also identify that kind of stuff. Like, this is a 10 for me. The fact that you walk in the door and you dump your book bag and your tennis shoes, that's a 10 for me. And how do you rate that on a scale of 1 to 10? Well, that's a 3 for you. Okay, well, guess what? I need to get to a 7. We need to get to a 7 on that. So how can we get to that 7? What would work for you? I would like to, and you just talk it through. Would it be helpful for me to put a hook right here? Whatever it is. Because that's what you do, right? You just say, well, I'm going to put a hook right here, and he's going to put it, and take his shoes off. It's going to be beautiful. Get your child involved with the solution is the basic thing with that. But anyway, okay. So, but I did put in here this motor skill sensory integration piece. This sensory integration piece is pretty huge, too, just so you know. One of the things that they're finding is that there are a lot of children who absolutely cannot regulate their senses. And so they're the children that as a little kid, you may have given them some warm food, and they were like, oh my gosh, you burned my tongue, it was so hot. You know, an ambulance going by, it wasn't just loud, it was piercing loud for them. They cannot stand tags in their shirt, their clothes bother them, they need you to wash their clothes to make them really soft. Though they cannot regulate their senses, and what you think might be a little tight is painful for them. Do you have a child who hates belts, can't wear them, socks, seams, and my sock isn't right. It's not right. The seam isn't right. Redo it. You know, you have to take it and put it back on. Anyway, okay. So one of the things this is a true regulation of their senses. And some of that gets better with age, but some of it really needs truly addressing, and you do that with an occupational therapist. So this occupational therapist that's coming in March might be interesting to see. Because some of your kids, you might say, well, I'm not my kid. But at the same time, you might realize, wait a minute, there are some pieces of that. Am I paying attention to that to see that my kid always wears long sleeves? You know, things like that. They might say, I just like having my jacket on. What is that about? Because they may need that firmness around them. You know, some children that need that, actually you can buy weighted blankets, and they need that security. Sometimes if you have a child who doesn't sleep well, you can put a weighted blanket on them and sleep like a baby. So,
Is that part of executive dysfunction?
No.
Okay.
It's different. This is more of a sensory integration thing. But there's, little things like that can save your life.
My daughter has that in assemblies. I know she has it. And yet she'll go to a pep rally, and I have to trigger my brain. She comes home and she's fine at the pep rally, or supposedly fine. She wears headphones.
Yeah.
She comes home and she has a meltdown.
Yeah.
And I have to go, okay, I saw that pep rally because it was the day that I was in a meeting here for something else, and I saw it, and I'm like, okay, she was totally overstimulated,
Yeah.
and just a reminder. And
And some of them, if you ever do a pep rally, you can watch those kids. They go straight for the corner. And some kids just curl up.
Yeah.
They just cannot.
It's too much.
Yeah, how do you know when some of that is, sensory issues versus, tag's gonna bother me every now and then,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So
Everybody
how,
has
at
sensory.
what
We all
point does
have
it become-
mild.
Right.
We all have a
Are
range of
all
views.
sensitive?
Yeah.
At what point does it become sensory integration versus?
Come in
versus
March
sensory
13th.
integration?
That's what our speaker's talking
Yeah, and a lot of it,
Go
and
for it.
again, I go back to these things. Is it interfering? How much? And do you even need to do anything about it? Because we know adults, they're like, oh, I hate that, I can't wear jackets, I can't stand it.
Can't walk in a
Yeah.
crowd.
At
Get
school, but not at home, or vice
Yes,
versa.
right. And then some of it is that they try to hold it together at school
Yes.
because they don't want to say anything, and so then when they come home, it's been driving them crazy all day. And I do think a lot of it is looking at the information that's out there. They have sensory integration ratings.